What if the person meant to protect you was the one you needed protection from? What drives a mother to kill her own flesh and blood? Mental illness? Desperation? Or something far darker, something we refuse to see until it's too late? February 10th, 2024. Byron, Wyoming. A town where crime is rare, where people leave their doors unlocked, where neighbors greet each other with smiles. But that illusion shattered in a single phone call. A 911 dispatcher answers an incoming call, routine at first. Then the voice on the other end changes everything. "This is Trelle Harshman. My daughters are dead. I shot them." The operator freezes, the weight of those words hitting like a brick wall. The woman on the line, eerily calm, continues. "They're in their rooms, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs." Her tone is void of panic, void of remorse, just matter of fact, like she's reading off a grocery list. And then, in an even colder whisper, "When you get here, I'll be in my room. I won't be alive." The line goes dead. The dispatch center erupts into chaos. Officers are deployed. Sirens wail through the streets. The race begins, but are they already too late? Could this nightmare have been prevented? And more disturbingly, why did she call at all? Welcome to True Crime Acts, where we look into the hidden truths behind some of the most chilling real-life events. Our mission is to uncover the stories that shock, educate, and spark change, reminding us that behind every headline is a victim, a family, and a ripple effect felt by an entire community. If you find this journey as important as we do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to ensure you never miss another gripping exploration into the depths of human behavior. It was a quiet, uneventful afternoon in Byron, Wyoming, a town where life moved at a predictable, almost sleepy pace. Here, crime was rare. Neighbors trusted one another, doors were left unlocked, and the most pressing concern for most was the changing weather. But on February 10th, the town's peaceful rhythm was shattered by one chilling phone call. A call so calm yet horrific that even the most seasoned dispatcher would never forget it. A voice, eerily detached and devoid of panic, came through the line. "This is Trelle Harshman. My daughters are dead." The dispatcher, momentarily frozen by the chilling statement, tried to keep her talking. What was she saying? Was this a confession, a delusion, or a desperate plea for help? The clock was ticking, and the need for immediate action was clear. "I shot them," Trelle continued, her voice eerily steady, void of emotion. The air in the dispatch room grew thick with tension. Officers on standby overheard the transmission, instantly springing into action. The dispatcher, still processing the weight of those words, pressed further, hoping for clarity. "Where are they now, Trelle? Can you tell me exactly where?" A brief silence followed. Then, in a tone as lifeless as the victims she described, she answered, "They're in their rooms, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs." Pause, then the final, most haunting admission of all. "When you get here, I'll be in my room. I won't be alive." Before the dispatcher could say another word, the line went dead. Cold silence filled the room, and then chaos erupted. Officers were dispatched immediately, racing against time. No one knew what they would find, but one thing was certain: this was not a false alarm. This was a mother's final confession. But were they already too late to stop the unthinkable? Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights cut through the otherwise peaceful suburban landscape. Officers arrived at the Harshman home, a 2-story house with a quiet, unassuming presence, a stark contrast to the horror waiting inside. Everything about the house seemed untouched, ordinary. A child's bike lay tipped over near the driveway, forgotten mid-play. The porch light flickered, its glow barely illuminating the front door. No sign of forced entry. No screams, no commotion. Yet something felt wrong. With guns drawn, officers entered cautiously, the air thick with an unnerving stillness. The silence inside was absolute, disturbed only by the distant hum of a running heater. And then they saw the first body. 2 of Trelle's daughters, both under the age of 10, lay motionless in their beds. There was no struggle, no sign they had tried to escape. Each had suffered a single gunshot wound to the head, executed with cold, unflinching precision. Downstairs, the horror continued. 2 more daughters lay sprawled on the floor of the playroom, their lifeless hands still clutching their favorite stuffed toys. The remnants of a half-finished board game lay between them, a disturbing contrast to the brutality that had unfolded here. Then, in the master bedroom upstairs, they found Trelle Harshman herself. She was alive, but barely. A gun rested loosely in her hand, blood pooling beneath her from a self-inflicted wound to the head. There was one survivor, 7-year-old Olivia. Against all odds, she was clinging to life, her shallow breaths barely audible. The questions now loomed larger than ever. What could drive a mother to such a monstrous act? Was this insanity, despair, or something even darker? Among the devastation, there was one fragile ember of hope. Olivia, the sole survivor. She was found barely breathing, her pulse weak. Unlike her sisters, she had somehow defied death, the bullet intended to kill her missing its mark by mere millimeters. Rushed to Salt Lake City Hospital, doctors worked furiously to keep her alive. Her skull was fractured, blood loss was severe. Her survival was a miracle, but even if she pulled through, the road ahead would be unimaginable. As Olivia lay in critical condition, investigators turned their attention to the most haunting question of all: why? What had led Trelle Harshman, a seemingly ordinary mother, to become a murderer? For those who had known Trelle, the tragedy seemed incomprehensible. She had loved her daughters, had always been a devoted mother, yet something inside her had snapped. Had Olivia, the last living witness to this nightmare, seen something that could help unravel the truth? Was her survival a cruel accident of fate, or did it hold the key to understanding what had happened behind those walls? Would she ever wake up to tell her story? This is just the beginning of a case that would shock the nation, raising painful questions about mental illness, maternal filicide, and the horrifying truth that sometimes the greatest danger lies within the home. For those who knew Trelle Harshman, the image was always the same: a devoted mother, a woman who loved her children more than anything else. She was the type to flood her social media with photos of her daughters, smiling, playing, and living the carefree childhoods every parent hopes to give their kids. To the outside world, they seemed like any other happy family, untainted by tragedy. But what the pictures didn't show was the slow unraveling happening behind closed doors. Trelle had been struggling for years. Close friends and family would later recall how she slowly began to change after the birth of her twins. The energy drained from her eyes, the laughter in her voice became less frequent, and the bright, enthusiastic woman who once embraced motherhood began retreating into herself. Reports surfaced that she had been battling severe depression, possibly even postpartum psychosis, a rare but devastating mental illness that can cause delusions, paranoia, and irrational thoughts. She had financial difficulties weighing on her shoulders, a lack of strong emotional support, and a growing sense of isolation that festered in silence. Despite these struggles, Trelle never screamed for help. Instead, she whispered her pain through subtle, easily overlooked cries. A coworker remembered her once joking about how sometimes it feels like the world is crashing down. But there was something off about her laugh, something empty. A neighbor recalled late-night pacing, where she would step outside and stare at the darkened street for long periods, as if waiting for some unseen answer to materialize from the shadows. Her closest friends began noticing disturbing changes. The paranoia. She started believing people were conspiring against her. The fatigue. She barely ate, barely slept, and sometimes seemed lost in a haze. The darkness. She began talking about death in a way that wasn't just casual sadness. It was a fixation. What no one could answer was why nothing was done. If there were so many red flags, why hadn't anyone stepped in? Why had this mother, who clearly needed help, been left alone in her downward spiral? Was this preventable, or was she always destined to reach this horrifying breaking point? As investigators pieced together Trelle Harshman's descent into darkness, they stumbled upon a terrifying realization. This wasn't an isolated case. Mothers killing their children, an unthinkable act, had happened before, and each time it left behind the same chilling questions. Andrea Yates, 2001, the Texas mother who drowned her 5 children in the bathtub, later revealing she was convinced she was saving them from eternal damnation. Susan Smith, 1994, the mother who rolled her car into a lake with her children still strapped inside, blaming a carjacker before finally confessing. Lisa Snyder, 2019, the Pennsylvania woman who hanged her 2 children in the basement, claiming they had been bullied into suicide, before her lies unraveled. Every case shared a haunting common thread. These women didn't kill out of rage. They weren't monsters in the traditional sense. They were women who had broken under the weight of their minds. Experts in criminal psychology had studied these cases for years, trying to untangle the motives behind such horrifying crimes. Some killers, like Yates, had suffered from postpartum psychosis, believing they were protecting their children. Others, like Smith, killed for selfish reasons, to remove what they saw as burdens standing in the way of their personal desires. But where did Trelle fit in? Had she suffered from an undiagnosed psychotic break, her mind twisting reality until murder seemed like the only solution? Or was she a cold-blooded killer, hiding behind the excuse of mental illness? Was this premeditated, or did something snap inside her in a single, irreversible moment? Investigators needed to answer one final, terrifying question. Had she truly believed she was saving her daughters, or was she simply ensuring that no one else could have them? The moment Trelle Harshman pulled the trigger, she did more than end the lives of her daughters. She ignited a national firestorm. What could have stopped this? In the days following the murders, experts, advocates, and everyday citizens weighed in on the deeper issues at play. Some blamed society, arguing that the stigma surrounding maternal mental health had failed Trelle before she ever had a chance to be saved. Others took a harsher stance, claiming that no amount of therapy, no hotline, no medication could stop someone who had already made up their mind. If she had asked for help, would anyone have listened? Did she suffer in silence, waiting for someone to save her? Or was this something much darker, a crime driven by selfish intent rather than mental illness? This case forced an uncomfortable reckoning, one that people weren't sure how to process. Because if mental illness was to blame, then who else was at risk? How many other mothers were walking the same path, trapped in a darkness no one could see? And if there were warning signs all along, why had no one acted before it was too late? As investigators pieced together the horrifying sequence of events, it became clear this was no crime of passion, no sudden loss of control. The forensic evidence told a cold, methodical story, one that left little room for doubt. The ballistic reports confirmed it. Every single shot fired had come from the same gun. That gun? Registered in Trelle Harshman's name. The gunpowder residue on her hands indicated that she had fired it multiple times, meaning she had moved from room to room with a clear, chilling purpose. The lack of defensive wounds on her daughters suggested they never saw it coming. They had been killed in their sleep, or before they could even react. There was no sign of an outside intruder, no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no evidence that anyone else had been involved. The only person responsible for what had happened inside that house was Trelle herself. And yet one thing didn't fit, the 911 call. If this had been planned, if she had made up her mind long before pulling the trigger, why call the police at all? Was there a moment after the last shot had been fired where she regretted it all? Or had she always intended to make that call her own cold and calculated confession to the horror she had just committed? It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. When forensic audio analysts replayed Trelle Harshman's 911 call, they weren't listening for the words alone. They were listening for something deeper. Was there panic, regret, a moment of hesitation, or was it something far more chilling? From the moment she spoke, her voice was disturbingly flat. "This is Trelle Harshman. My daughters are dead." No crying, no trembling voice, no gasps for breath. Just a statement of fact, delivered in a monotone that sent chills through everyone who heard it. Experts debated what it meant. Some believed she had already detached from reality, that her mind had shut down, leaving her sounding eerily calm. Others thought it was something far darker, that she had never been panicked at all, that she was simply delivering her confession, emotionless because she had felt nothing all along. But then came the most unsettling part, her final words. "When you get here, I'll be in my room. I won't be alive." For a moment, it seemed like a farewell, a sign that she intended to die alongside her daughters. But she had survived. Why? Had she truly failed in her attempt to take her own life? Or had that been part of the plan all along? Byron, Wyoming, was a town that had never known horror like this. Now it was a town that would never forget it. Neighbors, friends, and complete strangers gathered in grief, trying to make sense of the unthinkable. 4 little girls were gone. A mother, the person who was supposed to protect them, had become their executioner. confusion, pain, those were the only emotions left. For some, Trelle was a woman who had been failed by society, a mother lost in a mental illness so deep, no one had seen it in time. For others, there was no excuse. She was not a victim. She was a murderer. Why hadn't she asked for help? If she had felt hopeless, why take her children with her? Had the system failed her, or had she failed them all? No answer could ever bring the girls back, and no explanation would ever make the town feel safe again. The world moved on, but one person could never escape what happened that night. 7-year-old Olivia Harshman, the only survivor of her mother's night of terror. Doctors said she had a long road ahead. Physical recovery would be difficult, but the emotional scars, those would never truly heal. She would grow up without her sisters. She would grow up knowing her mother had tried to kill her. And one day, she would ask the question that no one could answer. Why? How do you ever move forward after something like this? How do you survive when your own mother tried to take your life? And the question that haunts us all, how many others are walking the edge of the same darkness? And will they be saved before it's too late? The tragedy of Trelle Harshman and her daughters is not just a horrifying story. It is a devastating warning. It is a reminder that pain can be hidden in plain sight, that despair can wear a mask of normalcy, and that sometimes the people we least expect are fighting battles too heavy to carry alone. But here's the most unsettling truth. This isn't the first time. And if we do nothing, it won't be the last. Trelle Harshman is just one name in a tragic pattern of filicide, a pattern that stretches back decades, centuries even. How many more names will be added to this list before we finally start paying attention? This case raises the questions that we can no longer ignore. How many struggling mothers are suffering in silence, on the edge of a breaking point? How many cries for help are brushed aside as just stress or a phase? How many people suspect something is wrong, but choose to look the other way? We often ask, how could this happen? But maybe the real question should be, who will we save next? We must stop treating mental illness as an afterthought. We must stop ignoring the signs. We must stop waiting until the bodies are counted. If you or someone you know is struggling, speak up. If something feels off, ask questions. If you suspect someone is on the edge, don't wait for confirmation. There is help. There is hope, but only if we choose to break the silence before it's too late. If this story shook you, don't let it be just another headline. Share this video, raise awareness, start the conversation. Comment below. Do you think society does enough to prevent tragedies like this? What warning signs should we never ignore? Like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to uncover the true crime stories that demand attention. Because sometimes, the most horrifying crimes aren't committed by strangers in the dark. They happen inside the walls we trust the most.